Hey, English 12 college prep students. This is awkward, but I guess all of this is uncomfortable too. I'm looking at myself speaking right now. I don't like doing that. Just looking at the way my mouth moves, and I'm wondering, does it always move like this? I'm sitting in a chair in my bedroom. I've got pillows on my lap and my laptop on top of that. It's this is not what I envisioned when I decided to become a teacher. But we do what we can. But yeah, you're catching me in my relaxed mode. I've got my comfortable flannel on. You'll notice I haven't even fixed my hair. But we're gonna get into Macbeth. Is it backward? Might be backward. Whatever. We're gonna get into Macbeth Act 3 today. Try to do this like we do in class. Um, Except you're not going to be able to help me read along, I guess. But so you can read along with me. I still have our version of the book. You don't, but you have a link online. Uh, don't look at the link that I had sent you before. It's still the same script, but I've I'm using a different link now that has the actual line numbers with it. Apparently, the other one did not, which complicates things when you're trying to cite your source. But that's all right. Um, so we're going to read the first two scenes of Act 3 today. When we're all done with this, just so you're well aware, there will be a quiz over Act 3, but that's going to be next week sometime. Um, you're going to want to take notes, though, of course. And in this act specifically, you're going to want to take notes over masculinity and femininity. There's a lot in there. Other ongoing ideas as well, but that's a big one. So if we were in class right now, before we even got into any of this, I would ask you to just do a little thinking. Probably when you walked into class, the question I would ask would be, what does it mean to be a man? And I'd put the phrase be a man in quotation marks. Now, I don't have any way of knowing what your response to that would be. I mean, I guess I could put that in an assignment, but it's just something for you to think about. Um, I would guess that a lot of you would answer in a positive way, while others of you, when you hear that phrase, you associate negative things with it. We're going to be thinking a lot about what it means to be a man, and also, I guess, what it means to be a woman in Act 3, especially in the way that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth challenge each other, the roles that they play, the way that they switch roles, even. So let's get into it. Act 3, Scene 1. The synopsis says, oh, you know what? Wait, sorry. One thing before it's just like when we're in class, right? Okay. So before we get started, you're going to want to jot a few questions down in your notes, specifically under the masculinity and femininity heading. Um, and let's see, where are those questions? I have them somewhere. Okay, so while we're reading, be thinking about these questions. What does Macbeth think being a man is? Consider how he speaks to the murderers that he hires, and also consider how he speaks to himself. We already know how he speaks to his wife. You remember when he was kind of trying to lay down the law, saying that we will proceed no further in this business about murdering Duncan, and we know how that turned out, of course. Um, Another question: what does Lady Macbeth think being a man is? Consider how she speaks to her husband. Um, and then I would also ask when we're done, maybe done with the whole act, but taking into account your initial thoughts on manliness, I would ask: do you consider Macbeth a real man? Why or why not? So you can pause the video, of course, if you need to, if you want to jot those things down. But let's get started here. Okay, so the synopsis, Act 3, Scene 1. Banquo suspects that Macbeth killed Duncan in order to become king. Macbeth invites Banquo to a feast that night. Banquo promises to return in time. Macbeth, fearing that Banquo's children, not his own, will be the future kings of Scotland, seizes upon the opportunity provided by Banquo's scheduled return after dark to arrange for his murder. Okay, so bad things lead to more bad things. The king has been murdered, and I remind you that when Macbeth committed that murder, he felt immediate remorse for it. But now, to cover up for that crime, he's taking on more. He's going to have Banquo murdered because he knows that Banquo suspects him. And of course, other than Lady Macbeth, Banquo is the only person who knows about the witch's prophecy. Anyway, to carry out the crime, Macbeth employs two men whom he has persuaded to regard Banquo as an enemy. Now, by the way, you don't have to watch this video, but if it's helpful to you to do things the way that we do in class, then proceed, because I'm going to read this, and I will stop just like we do in class to ask questions, to give clarifications, all that kind of stuff. The difference here, of course, is that I will be answering all my own questions. All right, I'm also going to just, unless I forget to say each person's name when it's their line, that might be awkward, but yeah, go with it. All right, so scene one, enter Banquo. Banquo, this is a soliloquy. He's speaking to himself, and he's speaking to himself about Macbeth. He suspects Macbeth. Thou hast it now, King, called our Glamis, all as the weird women promised, and I fear thou playedst most foully for it. Yet it was said it should not stand in thy posterity, but that myself should be the root and father of many kings. If there come truth from them, as upon thee, Macbeth, their speeches shine, why, by the verities on thee made good, may they not be my oracles as well, and set me up in hope? But hush, no more. So he's thinking, all right, well, if these prophecies are real, and they came true for Macbeth, then why can't they come true for me as well? All right, so it says, Senate sounded. There's trumpets off in the distance, right? Enter Macbeth, and now this time that we see Macbeth, he is the king. The last time we heard, he was going off to this place, Scone, for his coronation. We don't actually see that ceremony take place, but now we see him again. He's the king. Lady Macbeth, of course, is the queen. And now all of Duncan's attendants are his. So it's going to be Lennox, Ross, and it says lords and attendants. Macbeth says, here's our chief guest, Lady Macbeth. If he had been forgotten, it had been as a gap in our great feast, and all thing unbecoming. Macbeth says, tonight we hold a solemn supper, sir, and I'll request your presence. So they're holding this great feast. It's supposed to be a party in celebration of Macbeth becoming the king, but of course he says it's a solemn supper because they are still technically mourning the death of King Duncan. Now, Banquo is still trying to keep up appearances with Macbeth, so he's not acting suspicious to his face, of course. So he says, let your highness command upon me, to the which my duties are with a most indissoluble tie forever knit. Macbeth says, ride you this afternoon? Banquo says, aye, my good lord. Macbeth says, we should have else desired your good advice, which still hath been both grave and prosperous in this day's council, but we'll take tomorrow. Is it far you ride? Banquo says, as far, my lord, as will fill up the time twixt this and supper. Go not my horse the better, I must become a borrower of the night, for a dark hour or twain. Macbeth, fail not our feast. Banquo, my lord, I will not. Now, at this point, Banquo wants to leave. He feels a little uncomfortable. It's awkward. This is probably the reason why he's not even sticking around the castle for the afternoon. He's just going to go off and ride his horse and come back in time for the meal. Macbeth is not letting him go so easily, and what he says next is kind of trying to test Banquo in a way. He's going to repeat what is now, as you know, the official story. We heard Macduff tell it in the last act. The official story being, of course, that what are their names? Sorry, Malcolm and Donalbain, the king's sons, that they hired the king's guards to kill him, and that, of course, after they killed him, they have fled. Malcolm to England, Donalbain to Ireland. Macbeth says, we here, our bloody cousins, are bestowed in England and in Ireland, not confessing their cruel parricide, filling their hearers with strange invention. Strange invention, of course, being that it's actually Macbeth who had the king killed. But of that tomorrow, when therewithal we shall have cause of state craving us jointly, hie you to horse. Adieu, till you return at night. Goes Fleance with you? And usually that last line there about Fleance, Uh, Oftentimes, when you see this acted out, Banquo kind of acts like that's a strange question, almost like it's kind of a veiled threat, because of course it is. Banquo says, "Ah, my good lord, our time does call upon us. Macbeth, I wish your horses swift and sure of foot, and so I do commend you to their backs. Farewell." Banquo exits, and now Macbeth, addressing everyone, says, "Let every man be master of his time till 7 at night. To make society the sweeter welcome, we will keep ourselves till supper time alone. While then, God be with you." Lords and all but Macbeth and a servant exit. Sirrah, a word with you. Attend those men our pleasure? Servant. They are, my lord, without the palace gate. Macbeth says, "Bring them before us." The servant exits, and he's going to get these two people who are at the palace gate. These are two guys that Macbeth is hiring to commit Banquo's murder. They're hired killers. And now it's Macbeth alone. And this is another famous soliloquy from the play where he is kind of going over the whole process of determining how to cover up his crime. And if we had any doubts what his plans are, he makes them clear here. To be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus. Our fears in Banquo stick deep, and in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind he hath a wisdom that doth guide his valour to act in safety. There is none but he whose being I do fear, and under him my genius is rebuked, as it is said Mark Antony's was by Caesar. He chid the sisters when first they put the name of king upon me, and bade them speak to him. You see, he's trying to work himself up to justify killing Banquo. Then, prophet-like, they hailed him father to a line of kings. Upon my head they placed a fruitless crown, and put a barren sceptre in my grip, thence to be wrenched with an unlineal hand, no son of mine succeeding. If it be so, for Banquo's issue have I filed my mind. For them the gracious Duncan have I murdered, put rancors in the vessel of my peace only for them, and mine eternal jewel given to the common enemy of man to make them kings, the seeds of Banquo kings. So, he's convincing himself. Sorry, I gotta put my feet down because they're falling asleep. Okay, so he's convincing himself that it's the right thing to murder Banquo because he's convinced himself that everything he's done so far has, if the prophecies are to be believed, has been all for Banquo and for Banquo's sons, since, of course, Banquo has been given the prophecy of being father to a line of kings. All right, so now he's still talking. Rather than so, come fate into the list and champion me to the utterance. Who's there? Now enter servant and two murderers. Speaking to the servant, he says, "Now go to the door and stay there till we call." The servant exits, and Macbeth is in the room with these two murderers. And he says, "Was it not yesterday we spoke together?" So he's spoken to these guys already. And the murderers say, "It was, so please your highness." Now keep in mind, this is the king. He's now the king of Scotland. He's a big deal. He's like the most important person in the country now. So these servants are of course, or these murderers are going to be, they're going to be in deference to him. Whatever he says, they're going to go along with for the most part, right? They're going to be very respectful. But Macbeth is not just going to say, "Hey, I want you to do this for me." He's going to convince them that Banquo was their enemy, or that Banquo is their enemy, and that he is also his enemy, that Banquo is nothing but this rich fat cat who has been living this lavish lifestyle, and that he deserves to get taken out. Now, I mentioned earlier, and I think that it's commonly referred to, these guys are commonly referred to as hired killers, but I think it's worth noting also that he isn't going to pay them. He's trying to manipulate them into killing killing Banquo without any pay. And this may be because he just doesn't want to pay them, or it may also be because if he doesn't pay them, then it is more difficult for the murder to be in any way tied to him. So he says, "Was it not yesterday we spoke together?" Murderer say, "It was, so please your highness." And Macbeth says, "Well then, now have you considered of my speeches? Know that it was he," meaning Banquo, "in the times past, which held you so under fortune, which you had thought had been our innocent self. This I made good to you in our last conference, passed in probation with you how you were born in hand, how crossed the instruments, who wrought with them, and all things else that might to half a soul and to a notion crazed say, thus did Banquo." So he's saying, yeah, okay, you're these poor, pitiful souls. You've been this way your entire life. You probably think it's because of people like me, but no, it's Banquo. It's people like him. The first murderer says, "You made it known to us." Macbeth, "I did so, and went further, which is now our point of second meeting. Do you find your patience so predominant in your nature that you can let this go? Are you so gospelled to pray for this good man and for his issue, whose heavy hand hath bowed you to the grave and beggared yours forever?" Now notice the murderer's choice of words here. Macbeth says, "This guy is, he's trash. He needs to be taken out. And do you think so highly of him that you can let this go when he's the guy who's been keeping you down all this time?" And the murderer could have just said, "No, of course not." But instead he says, "We are men, my liege." There's something for your notes. We are men. Now Macbeth seizes upon what he just says, his choice of words there, and is essentially saying, "No, you say you're men. Are you really?" "We are men, my liege." Macbeth says, "Aye, in the catalogue you go for men, as hounds and greyhounds, mongrels, spaniels, curs, choughs, water rugs, and demi-wolves are clept all by the name of dogs." So, like, you're men in the same way that a mutt is a dog. The valued file distinguishes the swift, the slow, the subtle, the housekeeper, the hunter, every one according to the gift which bounteous nature hath in him closed, whereby he does receive particular addition from the bill that writes them all alike, and so of men. Now, if you have a station in the file, not in the worst rank of manhood, say it, and I will put that business in your bosoms whose execution takes your enemy off, grapples you to the heart and love of us, who wear our health but sickly in his life, which in his death were perfect. So, much in the same way that Lady Macbeth um, kind of taunted Macbeth about his supposed lack of manliness, now Macbeth is doing the same thing to these guys, essentially saying, "Oh, okay, well, you say that you're men. Are you really? What kind of men are you? Are you, just a normal everyday guy, or are you somebody who takes action?" Second murderer says, "I am one, my liege, whom the vile blows and buffets of the world hath so incensed that I am reckless what I do to spite the world." First murderer says, "And I another, so weary with disasters, tugged with fortune, that I would set my life on any chance to mend it or be rid on it." Macbeth says, "Both of you know Banquo was your enemy." The murderers say, "True, my lord." Macbeth says, "So is he mine, and in such bloody distance that every minute of his being thrusts against my nearest of life. And though I could, with barefaced power, sweep him from my sight, and bid my will avouch it, yet I must not." He's saying, "I am the king. I can do whatever I want. If I wanted to kill him, I could, but I must not. For certain friends that are both his and mine, whose loves I may not drop, but wail his fall, who I myself struck down." Like, I could kill him, but, well, we have mutual friends, and that could just get messy. "And thence it is that I do to your assistance do make love, masking the business from the common eye for sundry weighty reasons." Second murderer, "We shall, my lord, perform what you command us." First murderer says, "Though our lives," Macbeth says, "your spirits shine through you." Now that's important. So we don't know exactly what the first murderer is going to say. He starts to say, "though our lives." And we can maybe surmise that if he were to finish the sentence, he would say, like, though our lives may be in danger for, committing this act or something like that. But Macbeth doesn't even allow him to finish his sentence. Once he hears that they're going to go along with this, he cuts them off and commends them for their bravery and blah, blah, blah. So, first murderer says, though our lives, your spirits shine through you within this hour. So now this is kind of in the same way that Lady Macbeth had, once she got Macbeth to agree to this, she kind of lays out the plan. So now Macbeth is doing the same thing. Within this hour at most, I will advise you where to plant yourselves, acquaint you with the perfect spy of the time, the moment on it, for it must be done tonight. And something from the palace always thought that I require a clearness. And with him, to leave no rubs nor botches in the work, Fleance, his son, that keeps him company, whose absence is no less material to me than is his father's, must embrace the fate of that dark hour. Oh, okay, so this whole time we've been talking about Banquo's murder, and it's not until the guys agree to it that he's like, oh, and oh yeah, I want you to also murder his son, who's going to be with him. Yeah, he's going to have a child with him, kill him too. Whoa, that changes things, right? Because Banquo, they're convinced now is their enemy, but why should they have anything against his son? But Macbeth says, whose absence is no less material to me than is his father's. Now we know that the reason for that is that Macbeth is, secretly afraid that this prophecy is true, and that Fleance is going to become king because the witches said that Banquo would be the father to a line of kings. All right, so he says, uh, yeah, Fleance must embrace the fate of that dark hour. Resolve yourselves apart. I'll come to you anon. Murderers say, we are resolved, my lord. And Macbeth ends the scene by saying, I'll call upon you straight. Abide within. The murderers exit, speaking to himself. It is concluded, Banquo, thy soul's flight, if it find heaven, must find it out tonight. So we end there with a nice little rhyming couplet, kind of tying everything together. And now we go to scene 2. Both Lady Macbeth and Macbeth express their unhappiness. Macbeth speaks of his fear of Banquo especially. He refers to a dreadful deed that will happen that night, but does not confide his plan for Banquo's murder to Lady Macbeth. Now, this is significant because we are noticing a role reversal between these two. In the first two acts, while Macbeth was the one who killed Duncan, Lady Macbeth, it could be argued, was the driving force behind it. I mean, the first time that we meet her, she's calling upon these evil spirits to fill her with the cruelty necessary to carry out this deed. Now it is, Macbeth who is making plans for Banquo's murder, and Lady Macbeth doesn't even know anything about it. He doesn't even give her the specifics. He just refers to a dreadful deed. All right, so scene 2, we have Lady Macbeth and a servant. Lady Macbeth, is Banquo gone from court? Servant, ay, madam, but returns again tonight. Lady Macbeth, say to the king I would attend his leisure for a few words. Servant, madam, I will. He exits. Lady Macbeth speaking to herself now, a soliloquy. Naught's had, all spent, where our desire is got without content. 'Tis safer to be that which we destroy than by destruction dwell in doubtful joy. Now Macbeth comes in. How now, my lord, why do you keep alone, of sorriest fancies your companions making, using those thoughts which should indeed have died with them they think on? Things without all remedy should be without regard. What's done is done. So in her mind, now that Duncan has been killed, that's it. They have what they wanted. Macbeth is king. She is the queen. What's done is done. It's all in the past, and we don't need to do any more bad things. Macbeth, of course, thinks that they need to commit more murders because Banquo is suspicious. So Macbeth says, we have scorched the snake, not killed it. She'll close and be herself, whilst our poor malice remains in danger of her former tooth. But let the frame of things disjoint, both the worlds suffer, ere we will meet our meal in fear. Ere we will meet our meal, ere we will eat our meal in fear, and sleep in the affliction of these terrible dreams that shake us nightly. Better be with the dead. Oh, God. You might recall me in class saying, and this is kind of annoying, how Macbeth, um, he kind of feels sorry for himself at times, and he wishes that he could be at peace. The wonderful peace of sleep, of eternal sleep, of death, like the people he has killed. But of course, there's some irony there, because the reason why he's not at peace is that he's murdered people. Better be with the dead, whom we, to gain our peace, have sent to peace, than on the torture of the mind to lie in restless ecstasy. Duncan is in his grave. After life's fitful fever, he sleeps well. Treason has done his worst. Nor steel, nor poison, malice domestic, foreign levy, nothing can touch him further. Lady Macbeth. Come on, gentle my lord, sleek o'er your rugged looks. Be bright and jovial among your guests tonight. Macbeth. So shall I, love, and so I pray be you. Let your remembrance apply to Banquo. Present him eminence both with eye and tongue, unsafe the while that we must lave our honours in these flattering streams, and make our faces vizards to our hearts, disguising what they are. There's something for another section of your notes there. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Appearances can be deceiving. Earlier, we heard Lady Macbeth tell Macbeth, look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. And now we have Macbeth, in kind of a role reversal, saying to Lady Macbeth, present him eminence both with eye and tongue. So, be nice to his face. Unsafe the while that we must lave our honours in these flattering streams, and make our faces vizards to our hearts, disguising what they are. So disguise what's really in your heart. Now, Lady Macbeth is like, what? No, we're done. She says, you must leave this. And now Macbeth, showing a bit of vulnerability, says, full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. Thou knowest that Banquo and his fiancée lives. And Lady Macbeth says something curious here. She says, but in them nature's copy's not etern. So she says, yeah, but they're not going to live forever. They don't have eternal life. And Macbeth says, there's comfort yet they are assailable. Then be thou jocund, ere the bat hath flown his cloistered flight, ere to black Hecate's summons the shard-born beetle with his drowsy hums hath rung night's yawning peal, there shall be done a deed of dreadful note. Lady Macbeth says, what's to be done? Because, of course, she probably suspects, but she doesn't know because he hasn't told her. And Macbeth says, be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, till thou applaud the deed. Dearest Chuck, I don't know why he's... That's some weird term of endearment. I guess they didn't say honey bunch or something back then. But so, dearest Chuck, be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, till thou applaud the deed. Come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day, and with thy bloody and invisible hand cancel and tear to pieces that great bond which keeps me pale. Light thickens, and the crow makes wing to the rooky wood. Good things of day begin to droop and drowse, while night's black agents to their praise do rouse. Thou marvellest at my words, but hold thee still. Things bad begun make strong themselves by ill. So prithee, go with me. All right. So, even though Macbeth is the one behind this murder, at the end there, it's still they're in this together. So that's the first two scenes of Act 3. We know that they have plans to kill Banquo, and more bad things are going to happen, and because of those bad things, more bad things will happen after that. So, hope this wasn't too weird. Hope it's helpful, and we'll talk again in a couple of days. In the meantime, feel free to get in touch with me uh, for anything really. I hope that things are going well for you. I hope you are sleeping in, um, that you're not going too crazy in your house, that you're getting some movement in your day. I don't know, watching Judge Judy, listening to lots of records. Um, these are things that I'm doing, I guess. But anyway, I have never in my life wanted so badly to go back to school. I don't know if you're there yet, but I certainly am. I really want life to return back to normal, and I hope that at some point soon it can. Anyway, I say this in complete sincerity. Just know that I'm thinking about all of you. I hope that you're well, and I hope it's not too long before we get to see each other again. So, take care, everybody. Talk to you on another day.